We are counting down the hours until the Stanley Cup Final.
The Panthers are looking to make some history and go back-to-back,
while the game's biggest star looks to solidify his legacy.
We've got the top 5 storylines heading into the Stanley Cup Final on this Sunday night edition of Locked On NHL Game Night.
When that final horn sounds, you know it's time for Locked On NHL Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before. Only on Locked On NHL Game Night. Your team every day.
Hello there, hockey fans, and welcome to another episode of Locked On NHL Game Night. I'm Cam Stewart, a sad Boston Bruins fan on the third coast who is starting to enjoy watching the Stanley Cup playoffs thing without a dog in the fight.
And I'm Tyler Feldman, a lifelong Penguins fan, born and raised in Pittsburgh, but currently loving life in Austin, Texas. Cam, I know it's summertime, 100-degree heat here in Austin, Texas this afternoon. I realize this is a felt cowboy hat, not in season, but inside with the AC on. It's keeping the head nice and cool on this Sunday evening. We've got a lot to talk about. A great matchup, a rematch of the Stanley Cup Final from a year ago.
And we need that head at the right temperature, Tyler, because we're going to be picking your brain for the next 25 to 30 minutes here on Locked On NHL Game Night. It is a rematch, the Oilers and the Panthers, and we're putting that storyline aside and looking at the other 5 biggest storylines going in to this repeat of last year's Stanley Cup Final. Panthers, of course, taking that 1-7. What was a great series. 3 wins for the Panthers, 3 wins for the Oilers, and a great, great Game 7. Let's hope we can get some more of that. So what are, in no particular order, the 5 biggest storylines going in to this Stanley Cup Final? I think it's worth starting here, Tyler, because, this is 2025. Everyone needs to take it to the nth degree when it comes to sports. Oh, this isn't good enough. Let's compare it to somebody else. Or, oh, this is a pretty great team right now. Are they one of the greatest ever? Like, we can't just appreciate it for the moment. So that's where we start. The Panthers in their 3rd straight Stanley Cup Final. They obviously won the Cup last year. 10 straight playoff series wins. Man, that plays in any era after expansion. And now they're in the Cup Final again, looking to make it back-to-back. And already there's this talk. Are the Panthers 4 wins away from being a dynasty in the NHL?
In the NHL, maybe. Typically, a dynasty is 3 straight, correct?
I would just say 3 in anything. This is my personal definition. 3 in anything under 7 years.
The Cam Stewart defining of
but
a
then
dynasty.
Again, but then when I do that, Tyler, and this might hit home for you, if I do 3 in 8, I think the Penguins did 3 in 9 seasons within 8 years, and I still think of that as something of a dynasty, right? The same kind of core getting it done. So
with that Penguins team, though, you can make the argument because of the core being pretty much intact. Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Marc-Andre Fleury, just to name a handful. That core was intact for all 3 of those Stanley Cups. Look, I think we're living in the emergence of a Florida Panthers dynasty. What I mean by emergence is 3 straight is impressive no matter the era. To reach 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals, that's incredible. So I think you have to consider the Panthers because of that. Now, winning 2 straight, now I think you get a little bit more into the dynasty conversation because then you actually have cup lists to go along with those 3 appearances. Right now, they're batting .500, 1 for 2. Can they go 2 for 3 and then keep things going? Certainly worth the conversation, Cam, because 3 straight conference final or Stanley Cup Final appearances is just incredible. And you keep a bunch of the core guys: Tkachuk, Marchand, Reinhart, Bobrovsky. So you have a lot of those core guys that I think go along with the definition of a dynasty.
Yeah, and we kind of framed it in a different way the last time we were on the show together. It was, is this kind of a Panthers era that we're that we're living in right now. And eras are shorter than they used to be with the whole, since post lockout, right? With the salary cap and extended free agency and all of this stuff. So they are smaller, and it felt like the Lightning had an era, back-to-back Stanley Cups, 3 straight Stanley Cup final appearances. That's firmly over. It feels like we're in the Panthers one right now. Maybe let's wait till they win. Back-to-back is really impressive. There's not many teams in history that have done it, specifically post-expansion when there was more than 6 teams. That's a pretty impressive thing to do.
They've got their work cut out for them, too, in this series. Because you go back to the Penguins, for example, in that 08-09 era of the Pittsburgh Penguins. They lost to Detroit in 08 and then came back and beat Detroit in 09. Could we see the same this season with the Edmonton Oilers? When you lose a Stanley Cup and you get a chance to win a Stanley Cup the very next season against the team you lost to, that's a scary place to be if you're the Florida Panthers. Now, if you're a Panthers fan, though, I'm not sure the Panthers are going in with the fear of, we're taking on this Oilers team. I don't really think this Panthers dynasty era that we're arguing about right now lives in a lot of fear.
Yeah, and specifically not with their fans. I know we've seen some of the fans in the YouTube comment section. So if that's you, definitely get back down in the YouTube comment section, like, subscribe, help us out. But talking about smoking the Oilers last year, I was like, did I watch the wrong series? Look, you beat them. That's the ultimate bragging right? But it was a 1-goal game in Game 7. And a big reason why Edmonton was back in that series last year, and really in the final last year, and once again in the final this year, is the sporadic play going well for Stuart Skinner. We've talked about the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing of this playoffs. Storyline number 2. Can Stu Skinner keep this up? And when I mean keep this up, I think we've been really raving about him the last couple series. This isn't just good Stuart Skinner. This is really good Stuart Skinner, like as good as we've seen Stuart Skinner, even better than he was in the clutch performances last postseason.
Cam, I've said this time and time again. Sometimes in the playoffs, it's not about being the best during the regular season. It's about getting hot at the right time. Now, to our points that we're making here tonight, I think you could go back during the first series or even the second series. I mean, Stuart Skinner got benched.
Yeah.
And he's bounced back because of injury, because Pickard couldn't go. And all he's done is say, no, this is my net. It's been very impressive. It's almost been an out-of-body experience with Stuart Skinner, because my biggest concern with this Oilers team going into the playoffs was Stuart Skinner, was the goaltending situation. And he did not start out that well. He was struggling between the pipes. He was not doing enough to give myself and many others the confidence that this Oilers team can reach the Stanley Cup Final for a second consecutive season. Yet here we are, and the Oilers are back in the Stanley Cup Final. He had a rough start, but has been red hot. 6-2 with a .912 save percentage since coming back and regaining the starting job from Calvin Pickard. And the only reason that happens is because Pickard was injured, which is just so hockey. That is just such a hockey situation. Yeah. I mean, think back to Marc-Andre Fleury and Matt Murray. There's always been these goaltending fiascos. I mean, look at Dallas. I cannot believe what Pete DeBoer said about Jake Ottinger, and that could be a whole nother show. We could go 30 minutes on what that means for Jake Ottinger's future, and Dallas does not look good, but he wasn't good enough. The Stars weren't good enough, but somehow it always comes back to the goaltender this time of year. But if Stuart Skinner can continue what he's done over the last handful of games, Oilers are going to be very tough to beat. And I would not be surprised. I'm actually confident the Oilers win the Stanley Cup this time around because of the way in which Stuart Skinner has been playing between the pipes. So if he keeps it up, he has to keep it up. If he doesn't, I'll be taking away my applause right now that you can see in the bottom of the screen. But hey, if he keeps playing like he's playing, good luck to Florida.
Man, it's tough to take applause away, man. That's a tough thing to do. But what a story it would be for Stuart Skinner, by the way. Obviously the Edmonton kid and all he's gone through in this career, deserved or undeserved. Last 4 games, that conference final, .952 save percentage. That's not bad. He was solid in the final last year. He was okay. .909, .233. That on a lot of finals is going to be good enough to win it for you. But that is one heck of a Panthers team on the other side. Talented, deep, physical, great coach, great players. But do they have an unfair advantage that most teams in the league do not have? Let's dissect that next on Locked On NHL Game Night. But first, today's episode of Locked On NHL Game Night is brought to you by FanDuel. The playoffs are in full swing every night, delivering the highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action than right now. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before the puck drops and while it's going on. Player props, performance trends, same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. And look, if you're watching this and you're like, look, this guy's heating up. I was doing this with McDavid in the last series. The guy was skating past everybody. I'm like, he's due. He's due to score some goals here. If you've got a read on who's heating up, why not back it up with the same game parlay? And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. And if it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. Let me say that again for the folks in the back. FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet. And if it wins, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Bringing it back here on Locked On NHL Game Night. Cam Stewart, Tyler Feldman, going over the top 5 storylines heading into this rematch of the Stanley Cup Final. So guys, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel on YouTube, leave us a comment what your biggest storyline is, and of course, find us wherever you find your podcasts as well after every single game, and then some bonus ones like this one as we count down to the Stanley Cup Final. Tyler, much has been made about this over the last few days, and we've seen the proof in the pudding when it comes to free agency and things like this. But do the Florida Panthers, by just existing in a state that does not have state income tax, do they have an inherent advantage? Those like the Lightning, the Golden Knights, the Stars, do those teams have an unfair advantage over the rest of the league? Tyler Feldman is fuming. Take it away.
I don't know if I'm fuming. I'm fuming at the idea of this argument.
The rhetoric.
Because on one hand, you certainly can make a detailed argument as to why no state income tax could be an impact in Florida to keep players there. Because, hey, take for existence and for example, Sam Reinhart's $69 million contract. Okay? That's a more lucrative contract than he'd receive in states like California, New York, Ontario. Less taxes. I get that, okay? I get it. It makes sense. It's a worthwhile argument, but at the same time, it's still so silly. For me, a better argument would be, oh, why are teams in Florida doing so well? Well, I've lived in Austin for 4 years now, and I can tell you, after growing up in Pittsburgh, going to school in central Pennsylvania, being around the Northeast growing up, people are generally a lot happier where the sun shines a little bit more. You're telling me after a long road trip to Northwest America and Vancouver that you're not going to be happy to come home to Florida. And that's not going to make you play better, because we live in an era where health and wellness is such a focal point for the daily lives of so many people, and even more so for professional athletes. There's so much more information out there. Hey, you get someone where the sun's out a lot more and the technology is there to keep the ice cold inside the arenas. That's a perfect. And hey, you add in the whole tax situation. Okay, I get it. But I think there's a lot more to it than just, okay, it's more lucrative. It's easier to retain players in states that don't have to deal with that same tax situation. It is attractive and it's great at retention. But outside of that, sure, could raise eyebrows in this argument, Cam. But for me to say that this tax situation is why the state of Florida has now been a part of 6 consecutive Stanley Cup Finals, that's a little bit of a weak excuse for me. Okay?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I understand it, but it's a weak excuse all at the same time. Now, maybe that's playing it down the middle a little bit too much, but it just frustrates me that this is now a focal point of, like, maybe that's why the Panthers have made 3 straight Stanley Cup Final appearances.
Yeah, well, in terms of playing it down the middle, I guess I'll be doing that here, because to me, is an advantage? Absolutely it is. Is it unfair? it's tough to argue that. You know what I mean? It's an advantage in that, like, we see it in other sports. Like, how many times throughout their history have the Lakers just gotten, a guy who's forced to trade to LA or only was going to sign with LA? Like, it happens all the time. LA is a really nice place to live if you have the money. It's a really nice place to live. And certainly what you just mentioned there, after you go on a 6-game swing through Toronto and Boston and New York and New Jersey and Philadelphia, and you get to go back to Sunrise, Florida in the dead of winter, that's not bad, man. That's going to help with player retention. But then again, Tennessee doesn't have any state income tax. Predators were horrible. And best believe it helped out the Predators in what they did last offseason.
Okay, beautiful bring up of the Nashville Predators, because to me, Cam, that's just the ebbs and flows of the National Hockey League and professional sports. Who knows?
Yeah.
Florida could win this Stanley Cup Final, go back to back. They might not win another one for 30 years. And then we're going to say, well, what happens to this state tax conversation?
It's going to be, on the shelf.
It'll dissipate. No one's going to talk about it. We're talking about it because of the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers.
And I will say, like, I don't like any kind of governments getting involved in sports at really any level, but it is something that the NHL and specifically Canada really have to take a look at, because it is deterring some guys just to take home money from going to some of these places. Again, is that unfair? I don't think so. But
so, Cam, are you then encouraging these Canadian hockey teams to be praying for global warming? Is that what you're getting at here?
Pretty much. Quote that. Clip it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That's hey. What are they supposed to do?
That's the thing. I don't know how you move forward with it. I think it would be more unfair if you gave more cap room to a Canadian team or a team that comes with, a high state income tax. I think that's ridiculous.
No, I mean, you deal with the cards that you're dealt. You deal with the cards you're dealt.
It's been 6 years since we've had a cup final without a team, from a state with income taxes. It's crazy, but is it unfair? I can't sit here and say that it is.
Do you think the players in the locker room, once they have accepted their situation, they're like, oh man, like, of course, Florida's in another Stanley Cup because of that whole state income tax situation. Come on.
Probably. When you're going for that 50-50 puck in front of the bench, you're like, damn, this guy doesn't pay state income taxes. I don't think so. I don't know how much it's going to play into this series.
I hope please comment. I'd love to know what you think. I'd love to know what the listeners think. All you guys and gals listening, what are your thoughts? Do you disagree with us? Do you agree with us? Fascinating conversation, but at the same time, like, why are we talking about this? That's where I'm at.
This is a good segue into our next storyline, which is from a guy who plays in a province, not a state, that does have income tax, and he's actually not playing. A big part of the Edmonton Oilers run so far will not be a part of the Stanley Cup Final. Storyline number 4, Zach Hyman out, not going to play in this series. Upper body injury, classic NHL injury description, has had surgery and will not play. Hyman was a force in this postseason, not just in the points. He had in 15 games this year, had 11 points. That's a pretty good outcome. But how about 111 hits for Zach Hyman in this postseason? He was 15 off the record, which he would have challenged in this series. But that's more than he's had for all but one of his career seasons. He's only had 111 hits or more in one season in his entire career. And he did this in this postseason. He was a little quiet in that Stanley Cup Final last year. But Tyler, how important is that on the Panthers side that Zach Hyman, who's been a big part of this Oilers run, is not available?
For the Panthers, I'm sure they're excited to not have to deal with a guy like Zach Hyman. For the Oilers, though, major setback, but not life-threatening. The Oilers are talented enough and they're deep enough. And we've seen this. We saw this in the last series in the Western Conference Final, how they were able to play without Hyman. Setback, not life-threatening. It's a big blow for sure. Obviously, you'd want to have those 11 points, 5 goals, 6 assists in just 15 games. You want that kind of offensive production. You want that kind of physicality against a physical team like the Florida Panthers. But we're at that point in the season, Cam. This is the Stanley Cup Final. The Oilers need to figure out who's the next man up And that person needs to deliver. They know what's at stake. It's a freaking Stanley Cup Final, Cam. Okay? Zach Hyman's probably still very frustrated. It's accepting that you won't get to play this go-around. But a lot of times you'll see an injury like that help a team like the Oilers rally around a guy who can't play and perform even better. Stuart Skinner is going to need to step up more without Zach Hyman. But again, that depth, that talent that this Edmonton team has, the leadership on that team, the physical presence, yeah, you'll miss that from Zach Hyman. But the only big concern for me would be how Knobloch messes around with the lines. Outside of that, I think the Oilers, despite not having Hyman, still have a fantastic chance to get revenge.
It is a tough blow. They do get Matthias Ekholm back. And I think the toughest part for Edmonton was how much Hyman was coming on in that conference final. Game 2, especially game 3, he was terrific. But you said it. I mean, you get 5 days to prepare for this. He's not part of the equation. You can't make excuses at this. Everybody's somewhat banged up at this point. And for a team that was a goal away from potentially lifting this thing last year, I think they're not letting that excuse get to them. But if they don't get it done this year, what does that mean for the greatest player on the planet? Is Connor McDavid's legacy on the line in this series? Let's talk about it next on Locked On NHL Game Night. Locked On NHL Game Night alongside Tyler Feldman. I'm Cam Stewart, previewing the 5 biggest storylines heading into this Stanley Cup Final, and we have now reached storyline number 5. McDavid last year, it was such a huge deal. Finally, the generation's best player is going to play on the biggest stage. He wins the Conn Smythe, but it's in defeat as they lose in the 7th game. Now they get another crack at it. And here we are. This is year 10. Connor McDavid. He's getting a second crack at the Stanley Cup Final. They're going to need to pay even more guys that are part of this core. All that to say, you don't know how many they're going to get back to here. How important is this for Connor McDavid's legacy as we look back on his career when it's all said and done to win this Stanley Cup this year?
Cam, what do all of these guys that I'm about to read have in common? Jarome Iginla, Joe Thornton, Curtis Joseph, Pavel Bure, Matt Sundin, Jeremy Roenick, Henrik Lundqvist, the Sedin brothers, Marcel Dion, Eric Lindros. What do those guys have in common?
They are amongst the... I'm glad Ray Bourque isn't on this list, by the way, is what I'm thinking. They're amongst the greatest players ever in this sport that have not won the Stanley Cup.
And it bums you out, doesn't it? Now, I was also going to mention Ray Bourque. If you're Connor McDavid, as beautiful as the Raymond Bourque Colorado Avalanche Stanley Cup victory was for him and his legacy, there's a reason there aren't many moments like that in the NHL. That is a particular moment. I think if Ray Bourque was to have it his way, he would not have had to wait that long. Now, for Connor McDavid, Ray Bourque, 2 different players. Ray Bourque, very good, Hall of Famer, incredible player. With Connor McDavid, you're talking about a guy who needs to cement his legacy with at least 1 Stanley Cup victory. You look at Wayne Gretzky, he has 4 cups. Sidney Crosby has 3 cups. Mario Lemieux has 2 cups. This is a guy, a multiple-time Hart Trophy winner, multiple-time MVP guy, scoring champ, the Art Ross Trophy, multiple times, regarded as the most talented player of his generation. It has been a joy to watch his career grow over the last decade, which, by the way, you said 10 years. It is crazy to think that Connor McDavid has been doing this professionally in the best league in the world for a decade. He needs a Stanley Cup. He deserves a Stanley Cup, and you don't get many opportunities to go back-to-back. That's hard to do. You have a great core. You've got Leon Draisaitl on your squad. You've got a talented group of teammates. It's dealing for Connor McDavid. It's how do you deal with that individual pressure to cement your legacy in the ultimate team sport? That balance is so tricky. However, if you've seen the way in which Connor McDavid has performed and played on a nightly basis in these Stanley Cup playoffs, Cam, it just feels different. Yeah. There's a sense of certainty in his game, in the way he's playing, the way he's producing. It certainly matters, Cam. You'd be silly to say this does not matter for Connor McDavid. This is legacy cementing opportunities that don't come around very often that you need to take advantage of.
And on the Ray Bourque point too, like real quick, there are a lot of guys who have failed the Ray Bourque path. You mentioned a couple, like Jerome McGinley goes to Pittsburgh, then goes to Boston. It doesn't work. And all of a sudden he's a 3-year deal in Colorado and his career's over. Joe Thornton trying it at the very end with Toronto. You know what I mean? Some of these guys, it doesn't work. And when you look at, I'm going to go over a stat that you've probably already heard before, but I'm going to do it anyway. When you look at the Stanley Cup Final rematches, there's only been 3 in the last 40 years. And it was New York Islanders and the Edmonton Oilers in the early 80s, captained by the name of Wayne Gretzky, best player of his generation, loses the first one, wins the second one. That's his first Stanley Cup.
Let's arguably go to the best player of his generation.
I could argue that. Mario gives some good competition. I know. Go into the last rematch, right? Pittsburgh and Detroit. Captain, young fella by the name of Sidney Crosby. I'm still going to argue best player of his generation. Okay. He loses the first one, wins the second one. It's his first Stanley Cup. And now we're past kind of the Crosby generation. We're still looking out on the horizon to the Morgan Geekie, Gavin McKenna generation here. Sticking with the Connor McDavid generation. Lost the last one, captain of his team. If he wins this one, it's his first Stanley Cup. If you are into the NHL history the way I am, and that kind of poetic crap, then maybe, just maybe, this has to be Connor McDavid's year. Does it have to be? Maybe. Although I don't think either of those guys won the Conn Smythe before him, by the way. Crosby did not. I don't think Gretzky did either in 84.
Look, again, you make a great point.
Is it a storybook ending?
He's got to win one. He has to win a cup.
Really should win more than one, actually. I know that's a high standard, but we're talking about the best ever.
Well, think about Crosby. Won in 2009, and then it took 6-7 seasons, and they won back-to-back in 16-17. So everyone's journey is different.
I mean, heck, it took Yzerman 15 years to win one, and then he ends up spearheading a dynasty. So,
and now look at the Red Wings. Going full circle on the Panthers dynasty talks. If a city and team like the Detroit Red Wings goes through the cycle, of course, the Panthers are going to go through that cycle. No one is safe, Cam.
Well, sure, yeah. Look at the Penguins these days. Look at the Bruins. We didn't even get the dynasty. Brutal. So, hey, at least you got that. Anyway, those are
bold prediction,
okay.
Cam.
Go ahead.
Connor McDavid gets his first Stanley Cup.
Ooh,
I'm telling you.
It's 50-50.
I'm telling you.
That's a Tyler Feltman.
Oh, I see what you did there. I see. But if you look down here, it's with a D, okay?
Tip of the cap guarantee right there that the Oilers will win. I'm going to save my prediction, if that's okay with you, because we've got all kinds of other storylines that we're not going to call storylines going on this week before we start.
Cam, what if we allow the listeners and viewers to comment storylines that they want us to talk about the next couple of days?
That's a great idea, Tyler.
We're doing this Monday. We're doing this Tuesday. Maybe we'll leave predictions for Tuesday. Maybe. But what other storyline should we talk about the next 2 days? This will be the only day with me on the cowboy hat on top of my head. So
that's a real bummer. Get in the comments.
If you really enjoyed it, great. And sorry that it won't be coming back, at least in the near future. If you did not enjoy the hat, let me know. Tell me what I did wrong.
Either way, let us know in the comment section. Get involved in that comment section. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. It tells our boss that we're doing a good job. So do that.
Oh, it does?
Free. Yeah. I
got to get my burners fired up here, Cam.
Yeah. Tell everyone you know, and then tell them to tell everyone they don't know. You can find us here on YouTube, and of course, wherever you get your podcasts. Every night, building up to the Stanley Cup Final, and definitely after every game, hearing from the local experts and the chumps like us. Tyler Feldman, I'm Cam Stewart on Locked On NHL Game Night.